like internet governance. And there are some processes in place around global cybersecurity governance, but quite a bit is happening, and is happening right now. And I would say that at least from the discussions that I have followed and also had with my colleagues, that there are actually not good ideas how we should approach this global governance, or even global regulation that has also been suggested in some cases. For example, the everything related to AI and so forth. And I believe we're also going to hear about the hearing at the Senate, where it was suggested that perhaps we should establish a global AI agency similarly to nuclear agency or alike, which has caused quite a bit of debate whether we should, in which areas we should, and I'm glad that we are also tackling it here. But I don't want to take more time. Quite a bit is going on around the Global Digital Compact, also in the EU. The new EU Digital Diplomacy conclusions will be in the Foreign Affairs Council on June 26. Hopefully, it will follow with more strategic plan into technology diplomacy of the EU, but also member states are, I would say, more strong in this sphere, not only establishing tech centers in Silicon Valley, where also Melin is based, but increasingly also in Bangalore, some other cities in India, and actually around the globe to follow what is happening. But I'm really glad to first time introduce to our...
Puedo hacer ruido hasta las 11:11.
To introduce first time to Darinka Vasquez from UNDP, and she will introduce UNDP's activity around readiness assessment in Latin America. So please.
Thank you, Nele. Thank you, everyone, for having me here. My name is Darinka Vasquez. I work at UNDP, mostly leading the digital readiness assessment at the global level. And now we are, just because I am listening all this AI conversation, we are also about to launch the artificial intelligence readiness assessment, and we are actually about to start very shortly in this month. And so let me share my screen. Let me know if you can see my screen. Okay, great. Who's gonna take control the time? Should I do it?
I will do it. Not always I succeed, but I will try.
Okay, you just tell me. Perfect. Okay. So just as a little bit of context, during the pandemic, when people were heavily relying on digital technologies to communicate, to work, to access key public services such as health or education, the digital divide was affecting around 3.7 billion people. And we started to receive a number of requests from governments around the world to support them in providing solutions to this problem. So UNDP decided to do it in a strategic manner for two main reasons. First, because usually governments' approach to digital technology is fragmented or isolated, and it affects digital transformation overall. And the second is because we are a human development organization, and our focus is on people, and we wanted to place people at the center of every digital transformation process. So one of the objectives of UNDP's digital strategy was actually how to support countries to develop strong digital ecosystems. Here you can see one of the objectives. It's how do we empower these local digital ecosystems? And we decided to adopt, given the digital divide, given our position as a human development organization, we adopted a whole of society approach. And what this means is basically how we bring into the conversation different sectors of society to help shape the digital future of a country. And basically, we developed this framework that places this concept of people at the center. And it also sets out the different components that we think are important for the digital transformation at a national level. As you can see here, this is the framework, and we have people here at the top. We also assess other considerations such as connectivity, government, regulation, economy. But we also have place at the center what we call the principles of digital inclusion. And these principles are basically three: protection of human rights, universal access, and fostering trust. This is really key to our work because, first of all, we want to promote a rights-based approach. And what this means is basically we want to make sure that digital technologies don't interfere or limit human rights in the digital space. And this is not about creating new human rights, but actually protecting the existing ones, such as right to privacy, freedom of association, freedom of speech, and equality. So basically, we are thinking of these four rights when we speak that. Universal access, it refers basically to ensure access regardless of any structural barriers such as socioeconomical conditions, gender, age, geographical location, to ensure that everyone benefits from digital technologies. And fostering trust, which one of the biggest impacts of digital technologies in this realm is how we bring transparency and accountability, but at the same time, trust is an enabler for people to adopt digital technologies. It's like a precondition for people to adopt these technologies. So these three principles are underpinning the whole of society digital transformation framework. And this is the conceptual framework that we have. But how this works in practice. So we develop a readiness assessment based on this framework and these principles to help governments measure each of these. The readiness assessment is an online tool that helps provides rapid high-level insights into a country's digital strengths. It brings together different parts of society because this is a collaborative effort in the country. We try to bring together not only government actors, but we bring together civil society, private sector, academia, the media, NGOs, etc. And the DRA helps provide useful recommendations to governments. It helps identify gaps and opportunities for digital transformation. By combining three methods, we have a rapid country survey that is deployed to different stakeholders that are part of this exercise. We combine these findings with data that comes from our, it's called Digital Compass, which is a repository of more than 200 digital data indicators that come from different organizations, including ours. And then we do some desk research to complement and provide context to these findings. How this basically works, we deploy this survey to the different stakeholders that are participating in this exercise, and we get some insights. Everything is automated from this part to get a sense where a country is in one of the stages of digital readiness. This goes from very basic to a transformational stage, and it provides insight not only at the general level, but also at the pillar level, right? So for example, it can have different scorings for different pillars: infrastructure, government, regulation, business, people. And with this information, we are able to actually craft these recommendations and then move on into the next stages. The idea of this assessment is that it's a rapid assessment. It takes about 12 weeks to be completed because we don't want to invest a lot of resources into the assessment piece. We just want to bring a quick snapshot of the digital landscape in a country to basically help countries jump into the other stages and put more of our efforts in what is the strategic part. How do we use these recommendations? How do we implement some of recommendations, or how do we jump into executing some of digital projects that were identified during this exercise? In the past years, we supported around 30 countries with the readiness assessment. And last year, we had a special focus on Latin America specifically. We deployed the readiness assessment in 7 countries at the regional level. And we actually could not only provide these in-country insights to each of these governments, but also we could abstract some regional trends that are very interesting for the work that we are doing at the regional level. And just to show the type of information that we get from this assessment, these are 3 main trends in Latin America. The first one is that there is this huge need to develop digital public infrastructure in the region. Governments are actively seeking for support on how to develop their data exchange systems, how to deploy a digital ID system, how to engage with the private sector and the financial sector to mainstream digital payments. So all of these different components that make of digital public infrastructure are at the center, not only of the discussions on digital transformation at the country level, but also are a huge need for the people to be able to access and benefit from this. The second trend is the need to access affordable and reliable internet. As simple as this sounds, it's very complicated, because the questions come from how do we create PPPs to increase investments in infrastructure, because governments don't really have that capacity to develop this infrastructure. So they need to rely in the private sector. And in some countries, how do we attract these investors to make this happen? And other requests come how we develop a national broadband plan, how do we make it inclusive, how we can ensure that public systems such as the education system or health centers or public spaces have internet for the people, right? And the third one is the integration of digital skills into the education system. Latin America was really lagging behind in terms of digital skills in comparison to other regions. And here, one of the biggest requests is how do we improve this situation? So basically, how do we integrate these curricula into our system, and where do we find these resources to train our teachers and to train also students? So I think this gives a snapshot, because these 3 trends are also core problems of the digital divide, right? So if we address those, we'll help close the gap a little bit. Okay. And here are some results just to show you what we do once the readiness assessment is complete, and how do we start working in the next phase? How do we use these recommendations? And here are some examples, some recent examples. In Guatemala, where we deployed the DRA during 2022. We had 125 participants that came from government, civil society, private sector, and academia. We were working with the Open Government Agency, which is the agency leading digital transformation at the country level. And one of the results was we helped the country become a member of the DPGA, the Digital Public Goods Alliance, because of this interest on implementing some DPIs in terms of interoperability. And this was one of requests, not only from Guatemala, but from El Salvador, Honduras, and all Central America. They want to deploy specifically one solution that is part of the DPIs. And we are helping them develop their first national broadband plan. And we are doing that with the support of our regional bureaus and our country office. So we have already started this work. In El Salvador, we deployed the DRA in 2022. We had 188 participants. 60% came from the government and the rest from other sectors in society. We were working with the Innovation Secretary of the President's Office, which is the highest institution in the country for leading the digital agenda. And we craft the National Digital Action Plan that is actually now being used to work with the different international cooperation agencies in the country when it comes to digital. So everything has to go through that plan, so they can not only centralize resources that come from abroad, not financial, but also technical. And the DRA has been adopted as a tool to help monitor progress every 2 years. In Colombia, the DRA is being used by the new government. It's interesting because we did the DRA with the government that just was lost elections. And now it's being used by this new government to frame the national conversation around digital inclusion. And this is very interesting because we have a number of initiatives, but we are starting with one that is the ARA, the AI Readiness Assessment, this month. And in Bolivia, one of the main results is that, first of all, this was one of the first assessments in the country. Like prior to that, they didn't have anything to help them map their situation and to plan next steps. And we are using this in a number of initiatives. We have a data initiative, we have a civic tech initiative, and we'll see what comes from these efforts. But yes, I think this is from our side. Any questions, comments? Happy to respond.
You are punctual by minute. Thank you. Thank you so much. I would have some questions, but I see that Steve has a hand up. So let's take one, and then we can also contact you all later if we have any questions. But Steve, please.
Just a small thing, but to show that I was paying attention. On one of the early slides, there was a list of disadvantaged or groups that are at risk. And so I scanned through that list, and what I didn't see, maybe it was included in a different way, was different races. I noticed ethnic and caste were mentioned, but you know, sensitivity from being in the US, we have a huge racial divide. Yes, that's the slide. So,
yeah.
So the bottom left, I wasn't sure where that might be mentioned or implied.
Yeah, so this list is not an exhaustive list. This is just an example of what are the groups that are at a greater risk of being digitally excluded, such as women and girls, children, the elderly. Here we have ethnic, on caste, or religion minorities, but we try to provide this as an example. But every country has also their own particularities. So for example, in Central America, we have a big community of migrants. So it changes, but this is just to give a sense of who are we speaking when we say groups that are at greater risk of being excluded.
You say it's not an exhaustive list, but I can tell you as I look through that, I was exhausted. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question from Yolanda from ITU, and we have Alex Wong as the next speaker from ITU. So Alex, if you can devote 1 or 2 minutes to Yolanda, we can take Yolanda's comment. Is it okay?
Anything for Yolanda. Anything for Yolanda.
Thank you. No, Darinka, congratulations, because we have seen the evolution of the readiness assessments since we start looking for synergies with GovStack. So it's not easy to put in the screen more than 30 countries and very concrete results. So thank you for that. And especially in the main regional trains for Latin America, I think having now the opportunity to map out data exchange, digital ID, digital payments, together with the maturity that GovStack has reached now with a new version of the technical specifications, but also open software solutions that are going to be available in the sandbox in the coming months, extremely aligned to these trends, because in GovStack Sandbox, countries are going to be able to download open source software associated to data exchange, to digital ID, to digital payments, also to information consent, which is a major element in terms of data protection and registry. So happy to follow up on that and to keep looking for synergies. And the other question is if all this information is already public, and if the tool, because I remember that in one of the sessions you actually presented the tool that UNDP was building, if that is also available publicly, so we can also create more synergies as we move forward as well with GovStack implementations in different regions of the world. So congratulations on that.
No, thank you, Yolanda. And yes, you are one of the first supporters of the DRA. And yes, I think there are many synergies, especially related to the GovStack work that you've been leading so successfully. So yes, I think we should follow up on what we could do next, because this is one of the biggest trends in Latin America. And regarding the tool, it will be launched in July. We always postpone a little bit, but yes, we'll share the news with this group as well.
Thank you. And just GovStack is co-lead. So here's Nele, another co-lead, and Dial and GIC.
Thank you so much. I was wondering actually also about more the connections with other assessments that ITU is also planning and UNDESA is carrying out and so forth, but we can discuss it maybe also after, because we have Alex here, and on something that I personally am also very much looking forward to hear more about, because this year's UN General Assembly has a special digital day that is preceding the SDGs summit. So I see Alex. He's back. So Alex, please let us know what we should know.
Thank you, Nelly. And I owe you a phone call as we're exchanging notes on. So hello, everyone. I think most of you know me, but introducing again, Alex Wong at the ITU. I'm now in the executive office working with our Secretary General, who I think most of you know, Doreen Bogdan, who is always very much following that we're representing ourselves at this call with this very important group. So we're pleased that I see Yolanda here too. So yeah, I'm going to talk about something different this time, which is the SDG Digital Day. A relatively new ambition that we have kicked off at the ITU, but with the UNDP and with actually many other organizations who are now part of our advisory group. So I'm going to put on my slides. I'm going to plan, Nelly, tell me if 10 minutes, is that okay? Maximum? Okay. So SDG Digital Day. I need to start by, if those that don't know our Secretary General, Doreen Bogdan-Martin, I would start by saying that the concept of doing this during UNGA, which is of course a pivotal moment in the SDG agenda, we're at the midpoint And Secretary General Guterres is using words like, the SDGs need to be rescued, drastically behind. And so this idea of creating a moment where we could gather the global community to look at the role of digital for the SDGs. And I think I'm preaching to the choir. I'm sure many of you were involved in the original MDG, SDG negotiations and wanting a bigger role for digital. And it wasn't really hard coded into the fabric, and probably that was the right thing at the right time. But here we are now in 2023, and everything digital has such a key role. So the genesis of this concept really came about under the broader mandate that ITU now brings to the UN system and to the world, very much under the leadership of our Secretary General, is that we're only going to advance progress through partnership and by really working together in the UN system with all of our fellow UN agencies. And of course, focusing on the big priorities that have been identified already by the member states. And so this idea of creating a digital day during the UN General Assembly was first created and was first developed in January, and then further developed in a lot of bilaterals with many of the key UN heads of agencies, including many of their key member states involved in the digital agenda, including with CEOs. And everyone thought it was extremely timely and the right time to actually do this. So what is the digital day? So the idea right now is let's take a day and really take stock of the achievements and gaps on the 2030 agenda, and now focus in particular on what can be the role of digital and data. Data, of course, is another huge element in the common agenda framework, on how that can really game change progress on the SDGs. So we're going to do that by, on the right-hand side, on the objectives, we want to first demonstrate the role of digital. I'll get into a little more detail on what we mean by saying that. And of course, one key way is showcasing solutions. So a major effort of Digital Day is to research and identify and showcase use cases where within an SDG, digital has been used to really change the way progress can be made. We want to use, of course, Digital Day to mobilize new commitments. We're going to tie it to our Partner Connect platform, which some of you have heard me present before in the past, and many of you on this call have made pledges in some ways. We want to present a framework, and now it complements the previous discussions on what we're calling a digital transformation enabler framework. We're choosing that word on purpose because there's a lot of different shades of gray on what is a DT framework, but we want to come out with the enablers. And then we really want to make sure youth are properly represented. So I'll now put the list of our logos because we've been working hard to make sure this really comes out as a multi-stakeholder effort. And basically everyone who we had bilaterals with, who really supported this, we then went around and said, okay, come join our advisory group. So we have therefore, on the far left-hand side, our core partner on this is with UNDP. So working with Rob Opp, who is a frequent contributor on these calls. And then we have Boston Consulting Group as our knowledge partner. All the UN organizations, your head of agency at one point or another said they wanted to be part of this. So they're now, and now have since accepted to be on the advisory group. We had our first advisory group call last week. And on the member state side, we had conversations with either the head of state or the minister or the ambassador who have all fully supported this. And Nelly, you're, of course, we were only to reach out to you a couple of weeks ago. We have a few of our industry leaders involved who are helping provide some support for sponsorship. And then we are building out a DFI community. And in fact, the Inter-American Development Bank is expected to play a key role to mobilize the DFI so we can actually look at the financing angle. So what are we doing to build this together? So Digital Day is on September 17th, as a reminder, because the SDG Summit is September 18 and 19. And so it's intentionally scheduled the day before. We've been working very closely with the Executive Office of the Secretary General in the UN to make sure what we're doing is aligned with the broader UN program of activities, which of course is moving. There's a lot of things going on, but right now the 17th is the day. Leading up to that, we're going to be working primarily on what we're calling the SDG Digital Rescue Plan. That's our working title for the knowledge product, which I'll explain in a moment. We've also launched a competition to identify organizations or entities who've come up with some amazing solution. We're calling that the Digital Game Changers Award. We of course have a full-on marketing communications campaign. For those of you that follow our ITU channel, we are on a 17-week countdown. Every week we're doing an SDG social media little blurb that shows a digital solution. And then we have our advisory group who's working with us to help provide case studies, reviewing the content as we go forward. On the day itself, we anticipate this to be more or less a full day of programming. It'll be the launching of the rescue plan with a lot of focus on the case studies, as I've mentioned, and then of course, creating the opportunities for collaboration. So here's the rescue plan. I'm not going to go through this in too much detail because it's a pretty dense words are in here. But essentially what we want to do in the rescue plan, besides taking stock of where we are, item 2 means we're going to do a little bit of high-level analytical modeling to analyze the impact of digital on each SDG. Here's where BCG can weave its consulting magic with a model that we want to be able to say that if we can apply digital solutions to SDG 5, we can speed up progress to SDG 5 by X%, as an example. Item 3 is really the case study work. So here's where we're really we've already researched over 300 case studies. Some of you on this call are, Nelly, you're going to submit maybe 1 or 2 more, or already are being profiled as a case study. Item 4 goes to the enabler framework that I just mentioned that we're going to be working on, and this will be closely with UNDP. And then finally, the rescue plan is therefore how do we go forward as our next steps. I won't go into detail on this. This is the criteria we're using to select our case studies, but we're essentially, the numbers on the right-hand side indicate how many case studies we've already looked at. So we're down to around 50 that already sort of look like there's something that we want to start showcasing, but these are case studies that need to have been, most importantly, have already shown a positive impact and shown the potential for scaling. And that's really critical. So we don't want to just pick a single case study and then showcase that as a solution. There has to be a structure to it that shows it could be scalable. The day itself, so here's a very high level preliminary agenda. We want it to be 250 to 300 participants physically. We're still finalizing the venue. We hope that will be on the UN compound, driven from leaders and their delegates from around the world. We would welcome the DCD community to express their interest to join us as well. I think many of you have also made pledges, and we're sort of saying if you make a pledge, that's your entry ticket to come to the summit. And again, as I mentioned, we'll spend time in the agenda, as you can see on the right-hand side. Real focus is really going to be about the showcasing of the solutions. And that's it. That's the summary, just to give everyone the heads up on what this is. Some of you may have heard about this because I think it is starting to. We're starting to make a little more publicity about this. But I'll stop there with the end of my presentation and open up for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Alex. It was very brief but informative. And Kate has a question whether the group is as such at the advisory body, is it open? But I was also wondering about the case studies that you mentioned, because the deadline is approaching fast, whether there is already a list of these case studies that you have pre-selected, that it wouldn't repeat from, let's say, from the size that would like to present a new case study, or maybe you can elaborate on this process a bit, or whether it's even open.
Why don't I, we would, in a perfect world, this would be an open submission process, but we're kind of running against the clock. So I think for you, Nelly, and you're on the advisor group, you're going to have a chance for a one-on-one call with BCG, and then we can figure out which case studies. There is a submission template that I'm happy to share with this group, because I think probably most of you in this call probably have a case study you can submit. We are pretty tight on time, so my apologies, Mei Ling. I should have probably done this a month ago, but we didn't have the slides a month ago. So in all good things, we're sort of we're on a tighter timeline than would have been ideal. So Nelly, you'll personally, of course, have the chance, but why don't I share the case study submission template, which actually sort of says, don't submit a case study unless you've gone through these 9 filters. And if you really think you still have a great case study, go ahead and submit it. And I mean, it's a small group here and everyone is friends, and we're very much proud to be part of this community. So send me a note if you got something that you want to follow up on. I can put you in touch with BCG. They won't appreciate that, but I'm happy to do that. So Mei Ling, I'll send to you and Snyder the sort of like case study template that you can circulate to the group. And then anyone should feel free. We hope this will not be the only time we're doing Digital Day. And we want the website that we're creating, the microsite, to continue to have more case studies entered. So let's keep that in mind as well.
Yolanda,
Yolanda.
you wanted to comment?
Yes, not just very quickly, because one of the case studies is actually GovStack, and we pointed out the BCG team to Estonia. So we were waiting for their feedback to share it with rest of the GovStack partners for feedback and comments. So that is already cooking.
Excellent.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So there is some list available.
Yes, and just other question, because I think the SDG Digital Game Changers Award, are you exploring with development banks to actually finance the projects or provide any type of support to amplify maybe best practices? Because, for example, Inter-American Development Bank has many Type 8 to certain areas and different awards already in Latin America that provide actually funding to amplify best practices. So I think now that you mentioned that you have IDB, they have a lot of experience, Premio Gobernante, which is usually for best practices in government, other prizes related to sustainability, but they provide the funding to those best practices according, of course, to criteria and everything. But I think based on how you frame it, I think it's a very suitable way to not only recognize and visualize best practices, but also give them some framework for funding to amplify the impact.
Yeah, the competition is right now we're also looking for sponsors if we can do more than right now, which is essentially a ticket to the summit. So we're working on that right now, Yolanda. I can brief you separately on the IDB conversations that are happening right now.
Thank you. And I'm sure we will hear on the updates when we are meeting next time or the day after, and then we will all meet for the event in New York on the 17th. So thank you, Alex. And next we will have Marcy Harris, that I do not yet have a pleasure to know, but I'm looking forward to meet you, Marcy. She's a co-founder and CIO of PopVox, and she will talk about what we all probably want to hear about. And the topic is AI briefing with the US congressional staff. So I'm very much looking forward to your comments and views on this. So Marcy, please.
Thank you, Nelly, and I so appreciate you making time. This should be a bit of a quick update. I mentioned it to Mei-Lin in our last meeting, just because I thought it would be of interest to this group, how we're approaching this in some of the discussions that are happening in legislatures, and some of you may also be working with legislatures. Oh, excuse me, I'm trying to make a slideshow in other countries. So just wanted to share quickly what we're thinking about, how we're approaching it, and see if it's helpful for others. Can you see the slides? It works? Okay. So just to jump in quickly, yes, PopVox Foundation is a nonprofit organization that works very closely with primarily the legislative branch in the US, but we also have some international projects and work a bit with the executive branch. But our mission is to inform and empower people and make government work better for everyone, with a focus on capacity, innovation, and engagement. With the modernization, we tend to look at how Congress and legislative bodies in general maintain or do not maintain pace with the pace of change in technology and society. So one of the ways that we talk about it is this pacing problem. The idea, as we all know, that technology often develops exponentially while policy develops at best linearly, and sometimes not even with a very significant angle on that linear progress. For the legislative branch in the we talk about in terms of the external pacing problem. So this is whether members and staff understand how society is changing in a way that makes them able to keep up with regulations and oversight and other questions about the changing nature of technology in society, but also an interbranch pacing problem, because at least in the US, Congress often gives the executive branch more resources than it gives itself. And so the executive branch advances while Congress does not, and it makes it difficult for it to maintain its co-equal status overseeing the executive branch. And then the internal pacing problem is actually this question of how new tools will impact the congressional workflow really regards. And this is Congress's failure often to adopt modern technologies, modern processes for its own work. And again, when its own internal processes are so different than the standard in society, the gap between Congress and society grows every year. So the problem now, as we see the introduction of these new large language models, is that this pacing problem is increasing. So as we are all seeing in our lives, just the significant change in productivity, change in what can be done with a small team, if internally these legislative offices are not adopting similar tools, they will be on the receiving end of targeted advocacy, even attacks, disinformation, and other targeted input without corresponding tools to deal with the influx or to take advantage of the significant assistance that these tools can provide. So what we've been working with Congress on bit by bit over the past couple of months is trying to think strategically about how to incorporate these new tools into the legislative workflow. We have a speaker who's coming to talk with a group of institutional staffers on Friday, who is building a new open source, large legal language learning model that is, I think, one of the first LLMs that is trained solely on legislative and code information as the underlying basis of the and he said to me as we were preparing for this, Congress is not late yet. They often are late when it comes to technology, but this technology is so new that if they can begin learning and keeping up and putting the resources to work to maintain pace, they don't have to be late for this technology as they have been in the past. But despite many modernization efforts over the past 4 to 5 years, including the creation of a select committee on the modernization of Congress that was created in 2019 and ran through 2022. This was their final report that came out in December of 2022, which had 0 mention of large language models and 1 mention of artificial intelligence. So as we all know, in so many ways, the world has changed significantly over the past 6 months. And again, it demonstrates, I think, why government modernization is not a destination to reach and declare yourself modern. It has to be an ongoing process that creates feedback loops and the ability to respond to changing technologies and circumstances. So what is happening now in the US Congress, and I think in legislatures around the world, is that people are already starting to experiment with these tools without a lot of guidance on what is appropriate use for these tools. So we have members of Congress who are drafting bills using ChatGPT or drafting their speeches. We actually have the Chief Administrative Officer of the House of Representatives got 40 licenses for ChatGPT to share with legislative offices, and just invited people to sign up if they wanted to be a part of this experimental working group. They had over 150 offices sign up on the first day and ran out of licenses. So there is interest, and they know that the offices are experimenting with these tools. There's concern about how they are protecting constituent data or secure information and things like that. So a lot of questions about both how it's being used now and how it will be used in the future. I want to acknowledge that several legislatures around the world are certainly much further ahead of the US Congress in thinking about how AI tools should be integrated into the legislative process, including certainly the Greek Parliament, which is a leader here, and Estonia, we always look to for inspiration. There's actually a gathering this month or next in Germany on AI for parliaments. So we'll be a part of that going forward. But part of what we have proposed as a framework for Congress to think about these tools is that it is that there should be a tiered approach. So there are certain tasks that certainly it makes sense for legislative offices and administrative offices to start using these tools to assist with, whether it's putting a complex language into plain language that's more easily accessible for constituents, or even help with speeches and letters and things like that. Those are certainly risk tasks, and even to incorporating these tools into casework or hearing preparation. But over the long term, we really think that there is the potential for these new tools to make a difference in how we actually legislate and conduct oversight. So the timeline that we're looking at, we have both an immediate, short, medium, and long-term suggested timeline. In the immediate next 3 months, we're encouraging Congress to experiment, share information, learn from other industries and legislatures, and monitor the advocacy that is coming in. They are already starting to see what is certainly AI-generated mass advocacy, and to keep an eye out for inauthentic campaigns. But this is not really new. Inauthentic campaigns have been happening. It's just we expect the scale to increase. And then over the short term, to begin encouraging committees to hold relevant hearings, commission studies from the internal experts, begin to incorporate requests for these tools into the software that is approved for use institution, and encouraging prototypes. Of course, the long term, a more strategic investment, including investing in policy modeling and leveraging these tools for actual legislative assistance in the deeper legislative processes, including a multidisciplinary task force that will be required to just connect some of the dots across silos. And in the long term, we actually think that these new tools have the potential to fundamentally change the way that lawmakers interact with constituents, laws, policy, and conduct oversight, including a concept that we call outcomes-driven legislation. So the idea that instead of lawmakers getting extremely specific in the statutes that they write to say exactly how a particular policy will be carried out, that these new tools make it possible to actually set high-level goals in legislation, but then leave much of the discretion for policy implementation to local implementers, where you could have a much more people-centered and participatory process, allowing for feedback loops and even learning across cohorts of implementation jurisdictions. So if California decides to implement in a different way than Iowa or Idaho or Florida, the ability for each of those states or even local cities to tailor the implementation to the needs of the citizens of those areas, and the ability to learn from different approaches as a policy is implemented. So again, the way that we're working to try to help Congress not be late on this, and we think that it's an important approach to take with legislatures around the world, is by bringing together the people who need to know what's going on. Often those people who are the technical experts don't feel like an expert in AI. They're very humble, and they, you know, while they're interested, it is a very new field for many people who are very comfortable making websites work well, or working with legislative drafting software, but not necessarily taking on this really new model. But they're the ones that have to, because we can't wait for the AI folks to decide that they're interested in government. We're hosting a lot of briefings to share information and trying to learn from what's happening in other countries, including being a working group together under this new comparative legislative strengthening project, and eventually working to build digital public goods that leverage this technology for use in parliaments around the world. So our ask is, if you have contacts within your legislatures at any jurisdictional level, so city, state, even international, we would love to touch base, to share information, and to be a conduit for helping those working in the legislative space learn from each other on a range of these topics. And so please reach out if you people we should be talking to, and we're very happy to share the reports as they come together.
Thank you, Marcy. I am glad actually that we were not talking about AI regulation, and that I thought we would, because because often we actually forget that technology is here to help us, and I think this is a good example. But what a bit when you were talking, what resonated, and as you mentioned, Estonia, we in the public sector, we very much support the application of AI, and when we did our summary survey of our 4 years experience, when we had our previous 4 years AI strategy finalized, or the period was over, then actually what maybe surprised us from these survey results was actually the reason why public officials would be afraid to use AI, or what would stop them from using AI. And it was actually a fear of doing something legally wrong.
Yes, yes.
So there could be actually very many reasons here that we sometimes don't come into, and I'm sure you have a very good knowledge. I see 2 hands, but as we are a little bit tight in time, I'm giving the privilege here to Mei Lin, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention how important these topics are, and that within the US, we are looking at federal funds tracking for impact. And this is going to be a sprint that is hosted by the US Census Bureau this summer about the outcomes and impact tracking. So many of these pieces are starting to come together, and this will be done in Puerto Rico in conjunction with the potential work with Oracle, because Oracle's public sector is going to be actually helping the ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning for Oracle, will be used by the Puerto Rico. And so we have a tremendous opportunity to actually see how impact tracking could be designed in from the get-go in the public sector as an experiment in Puerto Rico. Over to you, Yolanda. Actually, I realized Nelly was saying that. Actually, only me. Sorry.
I think it was okay for Yolanda. We have a very packed agenda, but
Yolanda, go ahead.
No, I think we can follow up later on the open source software for legislators, and because that's very aligned to what we're doing in GovStack. So happy to have a follow-up conversation on that. Thank you.
That would be wonderful. I'll actually be at the AI for Good Summit, so it would be great to meet you in
of
Geneva.
course. You are based in Geneva, so.
Wonderful. And I did want to flag one thing I did not mention, but I think it again might be helpful for everyone working in to bring these tools into the space. A key frame that we found resonates with the Institute experts, how important it is with these tools to present the knowledge that they have and that the incorporation of these tools is not to replace them, it is to learn from them, because the lawyers who are coming in 10 years won't have 40 years of institutional knowledge in their heads. They will depend on these technologies. So it is essential now that we help preserve the institutional knowledge and expertise that is there. So even from a change management standpoint, that ended up being very helpful. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you, Marcy. This September, there is also Open Government Partnership Summit that is this year organized actually in Tallinn, that also very much looks at how technology can support democracy. And legislative process is definitely one part of it. So maybe we can, it's also something maybe to look up if you're already not involved. So thank you, Marcy. And over to another speaker. I'm very glad to first time meet Marta Bertolaso, if I'm pronouncing correct. Please, very much looking forward.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share with you. Let's see if I can share my slides. Can you see them? Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. So yeah, thank you very much. I'll try to present a few concepts maybe in 10 minutes and to leave time for some question and discussion. But the point I wanted to make, the contribution I wanted to make, is mainly related with the question, which seems to be trivial, but it is not, I think, which is why should we keep people at the center of our discussion, of our reflection, of our implementation, innovation in technological terms too. The first, everything I'm going to say is very much related with this paper. I assume that almost everybody here already had a chance to read this paper. If not, it's available online. But the point is why I have been interested in talking about living places, about prosperity networks, which is another way in my language of talking about prosperity network, because we are living in a period, in a age, I would say, in which acceleration seems to be at the end of the day, the value, right? The measure of everything. The faster, the better. And the other value that seems to drive all the time the technological innovation is this word of autonomy. But the question is, what kind of acceleration? Acceleration for what? And what kind of autonomy? What anthropological, I would say, point of reference we have to assume if we want to develop technology that can be really sustainable and in service of real people. The point I want to make is that sending a rock to the moon is a technical problem. Developing digital technologies, social networks is a social challenge, is a social problem. So we have to keep in mind that we cannot optimize the world for machines, for artificial intelligence, but for humans, for human beings. So the risk, in fact, is that if we miss this dimension of human beings, which are mainly and fundamentally relational, we are not looking, nobody is at the end of the day looking for an autonomy which is auto-referential, which is within a reductionist or a paradigm of selfishness, right? We are all the time assuming and desiring and working to connect with others, to share with others, to be part of a community. So the kind of autonomy we have to develop through technology, through the digital technology, is a relational one. The risk on the other side would be to homogenize our society without any possibility to create and to improve a real social bonding, a real civil society. there are studies, of course, there are academic work behind this, and also very practical empirical experiences, I would say. So here I wanted to share a very concrete case study I'm working for, and I'm developing with some of my collaborators, which is related with this idea of developing engaging communities by creating life experiences. The idea is that we are not trying to multiply bricks, not even connections, but real relationships, relations. And what happened? How can we develop technology if we want to move closer to our daily life? The case study I have in mind, and I have summarized in this slide, is related with this concept of a hub quarter. It is pretty much related with the question, how should we think of workplaces now, not only after the pandemic, but also thinking of the possibilities we have to combine physical and digital environments, giving people the opportunities to do what? In the first place, to fulfill their own needs. And needs, this is another claim I usually made, needs are not democratic. Although we want to be democratic in our technological devices and dissemination, but needs are territorial, needs are local. Needs can be individual or can actually belong and characterize communities, local communities. So here you have a summary of the needs that have been identified. And here is a very concrete idea of how we can meet those needs by developing technology. So the idea is to develop a new concept of city. Of course, in Europe, this is easier, right? Because there are a lot of cities, everything is very close to everything. So there is an opportunity in this sense. But at different scale, it can be implemented in very different countries around the world. And the vision that is a company we are working with has developed is articulated on these three pillars, right? Sustain, engaging, and this idea of developing a new concept of places. I don't have time to go into the details, but maybe at the end, in the last minutes, I show you a tool we have developed, having in mind the framework we are moving from and the practical, concrete, material possibilities we have to implement it. The idea is to combine method and style and to change behavior for the better, for a sustainable society, sustainable processes, also in the technological innovation. From a theoretical point of view, the challenge is to move from a reductionist, an agency-based framework, which is mainly concerned with the functional skills, also in the technological area, towards a proactive participatory framework, empowering presence, concepts, related concepts. So the idea of developing this relational dependency, this kind of generative interactions that can rely upon the very nature of human beings. So this is the tool we have developed. This is an app. Through this app, we are able to measure, to develop metrics in order to to evaluate the generativity of those places I have mentioned earlier, those workplaces in this case. So we are working with these three dimensions that are coupled. Resonance, entanglement, and growth. Growth in terms of social capital, intellectual capital within a company and across companies that are using, for example, the same workplace. And we are developing this idea of ecoverso when we foresee to combine and to develop these technologies also in the metaverse through this kind of technology. It's possible to develop a place that is human as far as it is able to develop those 3 dimensions. And we have empirical evidences about this. You can find in internet more information about this app. So I won't take your time here, but I'm happy to answer or to continue with any follow-up on this. And I wish that we can really move forward towards a digital humanism, and gratefulness is clearly part of the challenge and of the possibilities we have in front of us. Thank you for giving me these possibilities.
Thank you so much, Marta. It was extremely fascinating to see how we can fit this technology and all these developments into our human nature. That indeed is not that innovative, but I think rather conservative also in very many ways. So I'm wondering whether anybody else would like to step in or comment at this point. But if not, I will have actually a very practical question. How much do governments or tech companies engage you from your work? So how busy you are?
Well, we all are very busy, but there is a great interest, definitely in Europe, but it is spreading around. And but there are many companies at the moment interested. Some of them are clustered by common needs and the challenges in different territories, definitely in Italy. And we have a very concrete experiments we are working on and projects. But there are also big companies like Poste, which is the main office's owner in Italy, right? That has now invested a lot of money. At the moment, we are managing 20 million, I think, for this, to improve their offices through this new approach. So I really hope to have more empirical evidences about the potential impact of this approach in a while. Thank you for asking.
I want to speak up because Marta and I are the co-authors of the Think 7 paper for the Japan G7, which the link is in the chat. The interest is really high in how we can have much more people-centered science and digital transformation. And as I worked with Marta on the paper, the input by the Sherpas for the future G7, Italy will have the G7 presidency in 2024. And there is a strong interest, I believe, Marta, and she is so connected to what is going on in Italy and what Italy is interested in bringing forward. And I kept thinking during this whole process, you know, Italy is the country that brought us the Montessori system. It's helping us to bring back our humanity into the digital world. I just so appreciate Marta's leadership in academia. And Marta, maybe you can say a little bit about the Springer series that you're the chief editor for.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. If you have time, I can copy maybe the link here in the chat and also my email. But the Springer series is related with the human perspectives on health sciences and technology. So this idea that we are technical by nature as human beings, so we can not avoid, right, to develop technological tools, but we have to combine them with a new understanding of human beings, which are not merely interested in acceleration, in getting access to everything, but to develop a real understanding of what is going on and of the social challenges we are facing with. So that's mainly, but I can copy the link to the Springer series, and you are very welcome if anybody wants to send or submit a project, right? It's a tool. It's a tool I wanted to share to spread out this kind of contents. So thank you very much. Here is thank you, Maylin. It's
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marta. And thank you, Meilin, too, for the introduction. We will now move to MasterCard. Maybe potentially a client in the future, and Arturo Franco will introduce Solidarity in Action initiative. So I'm
Hi.
glad to
Hi,
give the
Nelly.
floor to you after Marta.
Yeah,
Hello.
thank you. No, and thank you to everyone who's presented. I think it's been once again, Meilin, a very exciting meeting. I was asked to talk about a particular project that we're doing on the social impact side of MasterCard in the United States. But I think since there's a lot of people that I don't know on the call, I just wanted to be a little bit more broad about what MasterCard does in the space of tech for good and data for good and digital economy. I work for a part of MasterCard that's called the Center for Inclusive Growth. It's a part of our story of social innovation and social contribution. It is a very long story. MasterCard started doing social impact work back in 2006 when we established the MasterCard Foundation that most of you would be aware of as part of our IPO, and is now one of the biggest corporate foundations in the world, and it's fully focused on youth development in Africa. But the company didn't stop there. In 2010, we made a massive commitment to the World Bank of financially including 500 million people. That extended to a digital inclusion commitment of 1 billion people brought into the formal financial system through digital means. And then in 2015 and 16, we created this center basically to try to tackle inequality, and not just economic inequality, but also information inequality, digital inequality. And so we have a $500 million commitment to inclusive growth. And a couple of years ago, we created another $500 million commitment to racial equity in the United States. So that's kind of a broad stroke of the kind of social impact work of MasterCard. Today, we released our 2022 sustainability report, and there's a whole part about tech for good and data for good there if you're more interested in what we're doing up to today. And so, as I said, the center is a little bit of a strange beast. It sits inside the company, but it looks outside to see where we can have impact, not just with money, but also using the assets of MasterCard, our technology, our products, our services, and our people. So there's a lot of people that volunteer, our data scientists or our engineers, they volunteer their time to work with the NGOs and the social sector. These are some of the pillars of the work of the center: financial security, small business growth, and what we call impact data science. And in each one of those, I will very briefly kind of connect it to the conversation about how to, expand access to digital services and products. So as you will see, our focus is very digital and equity focused. What we do in financial security, understanding that the workplace is changing, that labor markets are complicated, that low-skilled workers are finding it hard to find mobility upwards, and not just in the United States, but around the world. We help people train for a digital future. We do reskilling, upskilling. We've gotten into things like portable benefits and educational benefits. And we've done a lot of research around the future of work with Bruegel in Europe, and also funding the Work Price Network in the United States. So that's, kind of a place where we think technology can help workers find the pathways to prosperity. The second topic I mentioned, small business. Again, we have a very digital focus. We have a big program called Strive that we do around the world, where we basically skill small business owners to connect to the digital economy. There's a whole website of Strive. And here we also do a lot of research with the Gates Foundation. We're funding the biggest analysis of small firms in the world. It includes 7 countries, and they've been following their financial lives for a year to understand how we can support small firms in the future. And it's called the Small Firms Diaries. You can look it up. It's led by NYU. But again, a lot of our programs are about kind of connecting them to the digital economy. And then finally, and this is closer to me because it's one of the portfolios that I lead, we think that there is a data inequality, that there's an information inequality, but also that there could be more impact if the social sector and the public sectors, to some extent, had better access to data science and the data decision-making tools that the private sector uses. And so we've gone into this big rabbit hole of trying to understand how private sector data can support NGOs and local leaders and economic development agencies. We've created public access tools like the Inclusive Growth Score. We've created a whole cohort of cities in the US called Data for Equity, where they are exploring different ways of measuring and managing equity-related objectives in their cities. Again, I could present for a whole day on what we've done there, but the idea is, and we've created data.org with the Rockefeller Foundation, an organization that is dedicated to building the field of data for good and data for social impact. And that's what the center is. I was asked to talk about In Solidarity. If technology doesn't fail, I'm actually going to play a video because we've just done a summary of the first 2 years of In Solidarity, and and that way you're not tired of my voice. Let's see if this works.
Our passion, our drive, and our purpose has always been people. And our commitment to creating lasting positive change for Black communities remains unwavering. Over the past year, our In Solidarity initiatives across 3 strategic pillars have allowed us to make strides in advancing racial equality within our organization and communities. Our commitment to creating an inclusive work culture was realized when we launched our quarterly DEI ELT dashboards to reinforce leader accountability, integrated ESG goals into bonus calculations for all employees, and debuted Unlocked to democratize access to development opportunities. We also ignited our diversity recruitment through engagements with HBCUs, new recruitment teams with diverse senior leadership, and the visible talent brand for our Black talent pipeline. In the market, we focused on amplifying Black voices by connecting with small and Black-owned businesses, ambassadors, and educational opportunities. We increased our partnerships with Black suppliers by 40%, fueled our mission with further education, developing a white paper in microsite, highlighting the needs of mass and affluent Black consumers. We launched an innovative cards program with Black-owned fintechs and created the Start Path In Solidarity program. When it came to society at large, we focused on driving education and opportunity to positively impact the Black community. We deepened our commitment to HBCUs by establishing centers for Black entrepreneurship at Morehouse and Spelman colleges, applied data analytics master's program at Howard University, and broadening participation in computing at Morehouse College. We launched Data for Equity to help city leaders utilize inclusive growth data in their decision-making. We connected Black-owned businesses with programming, training, funding, and resources, and helped the St. Louis Police Department experience ABLE training. All of this is what led us to be named the only private corporation on the U.S. Treasury Advisory Committee on Racial Equity and a founding member of the Economic Opportunity Coalition in partnership with the White House. It's our belief that diversity and inclusion are forces for good, for innovation and growth. While we've accomplished much over the past, our work is far from done. We made significant progress toward our efforts in 2022, and we'll continue to deepen our impact as we move forward into the coming year. We're committed to fighting racism, being a voice for change, and creating a world of equal opportunity for all. Because individually, we're strong, but together, we're unstoppable.
Okay, I mean, one of the perks of working for the private sector is that you get like fancy videos made. So I just wanted to show off a little bit. But so basically that's, you know, that's what we're up to. A lot of it has to do with technology and how to distribute it more equitably. A lot of it has to do with capacity building of the social sector and the public sector to use the technology. And a lot has to do with, you know, looking for other places for talent and for innovation. So please reach out if anything resonates, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Arturo. We very much resonate with private sector and banks actually when it comes to Estonia's digitalization. So I have a soft spot for some of the partnerships that we have had. But I see that Mei Lin would like to comment.
I am just so pleased to have Arturo and Masi speak about what is going on in the United States, because I think the digital transformation story has been actually, because of the former focus of UNDP and the World Bank on developing countries, looked on as a developing country issue, but really digital is not at all, and it needs to have the lessons cross-fertilized. And I'm just so proud to have DCD, Digital Cooperation and Diplomacy, be the place where we can have this cross-fertilization. So thank you both, Arturo and Masi.
Thank you so much. I believe we could almost make it on time now that we are returning back to actually UN General Assembly, but this time to the Science Summit. So Declan Kilrain, I am glad to give a floor to you. I remember we had this overview almost a year ago, and I'm I'm glad to have you back.
No, great to be back, and delighted to be here. And I'll give you the short version. But if I could just one brief comment on the fascinating presentation by Arturo and data equity, and just one thing we're working on at the Science Summit is the idea of no regulation without representation. And for me, we talk a lot about inclusion, but my view is that the advent of data protection and AI regulation by developed nations has the huge potential to negatively impact access to data by less developed nations. Thank you, Arturo, for a fascinating presentation. I'll just give you a brief overview on the Science Summit, as you may recall from last year, and also from Mei Lin. We have a simple objective, and that is to raise awareness of the contribution of science and technology to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And depending where you're coming from or what you're doing in life, this year we're starting a discussion on the Summit of the Future in 2024. Also, there's a lot more talk, and maybe more than I would like, I'm not sure, on the post SDG agenda. So we're diving into the middle of this, and really, I suppose, simply put, we're arguing that science technology was not recognized in the Millennium Development Goals, is not recognized in the SDGs, and if it's not going to be recognized, well, then a lot of the stuff, better health, yada yada yada, is not going to happen. So we need to find models for global science, which in fact, global science doesn't actually exist. Yeah, a lot of people talk about it, but it's really something which is still far away, and we need to advance that. So at the summit last year, we had 400 sessions. We had about 45% of those were hybrid in New York. The rest were online. The online stuff is very, very important. I, like a lot of people, love to go to New York in September, but remember, people top of the list who are not going to get the money or a visa to travel to the United States are Black female scientists. So we can't exclude them. And by not taking efforts to include those and many other groups, we need to recognize this as vitally important. So we're going to be doing a lot of that. Apart from that, we're going to have a program from the 12th of September which is the opening, until the 29th, which is exactly the duration of the General Assembly itself. We expect to have a similar number of sessions. We're covering literally everything, but we'll have a very strong focus on health, on biodiversity. And if you combine those together, we are talking about One Health, and we want to see how One Health can work globally, and data has a lot to do with that. And I'm very happy to be working with Mei Lin on many aspects of the program, but we are looking for a digital day, a digital program, and partly why we're doing that is because we are fascinated, and I think Malay, I can't speak for Mei Lin, but I'm guessing we are very, very, very enamored and supportive of the United Nations Global Digital Compact process. However, it will not have a legal basis, and without a legal basis, then one has to wonder what the impact will be. So part of what we're doing at the summit again is looking at, and I mentioned it before, the enabling policy and a regulatory environment. Sort of what is that, and how do you do it? And how do you do it with many groups who are excluded? And that's why, again, delighted to be working with Mei Lin on the concept of digital sandbox and sandboxing. I think this is hugely important, where you bring the regulatory challenges down to a community and a local level. And just going back to my earlier point, no regulation without representation. And we're serious about this. It can't be that a number of advanced nations are regulating for everybody else. That did work. It doesn't work. It cannot work. It's unacceptable. And it's bad policy making. It's bad regulation. And it stacks up a huge foundation of exclusion, because the opposite to inclusion is exclusion. And these regulations not only are exclusive, but also are biased against Black people, against women, against many sectors. And I think we have to, and groups, and this has to be part of the discussions that we will have going forward. So we will be sharing the program with you. I think we're going to publish on Tuesday of next week. Happy, of course, to have you involved and participating and whatever you want to do. It's a very open process. It's bottom up. It is big, but we don't aim for big. We aim for inclusive. But if you do inclusive, you're going to have big. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You raised many of the issues that I'm sure many of us also in this call are concerned, and I'm also glad that that people-centered internet is also part of this process, and hopefully also private sector that also has been in the minority also in our calls will be more involved and will have also, let's say, more representation in this process than it has had until now, with in some occasions not even been given an opportunity to speak at these meetings or hearings. But I believe the process facilitators have also learned, and by now hopefully it will improve. We will be definitely keeping an eye on the Digital Global Compact. We will meet again in July. I'm sure we will have some updates. The meet report of the compact came out with a lot of suggestions to establish yet in other forums and centers to coordinate our digital cooperation. There has been some criticism, but it's also definitely not an easy process to bring together all these different viewpoints, and especially in some areas where we could have perhaps bigger players that have their own interests, and it will get perhaps to a debate between them. But before closing and welcoming you back in July, I'm wondering whether Mei Lin has anything to say, but I would definitely have to thank Mei Lin for a very fascinating hour and a half that I have had. So thank you, Mei Lin, but if you want to add anything from your side.
I just want to thank everybody for coming, and I think this is a really good cross-fertilization of initiatives. So thank you all for presenting as well.
Thank you. And see you soon.
Thank you.